if you can sort of take off from your piece in the Hindu, where you talked about, what steps can be taken by the government to kick the SME sector back into life, and give your sort of take on what has happened so far, and as a small business owner yourself,
Yeah.
how we can move forward. Yeah.
Yeah. So, first of all, it's an honor to be here. Thanks a lot for inviting me. So, what got me thinking about this was the fact that the words force major were being loosely bandied about. Everybody was claiming force major as if it's a matter of right. And it got me thinking about what the contractual scheme was. How do you claim force major in these situations? What is the underlying law behind force major, and whether you can claim it as a matter of right? Um, and I thought about it, and I did some work, and I realized that this is a situation where many people stand to lose their jobs. They're also consumers. In fact, the scale of job loss in the US and in Europe is colossal by any measure. So, if there was a moment in time for the government to step in, it was now, and it was time for the government to create some sort of a measure whereby a sort of a standstill could be arrived at, or a moratorium could be arrived at on contractual obligations, and where SMEs and other people are concerned. It would typically apply in the context of leases for office spaces, bank guarantees being given, payments under loans, and whatnot. So, in these sort of situations, in fact, Singapore has come out with a law which protects people, small business owners, professionals, and the like, and gives a sort of a moratorium, a sort of a 6-month deferral of contractual obligations, which could be used by the government in India. We could incorporate some of those vital design features of the Singapore law, arrive at enact a similar law in India, and provide relief. This will also ensure that liquidity gets into the hands of small business owners, and they'd be able to ride out the hard months that are coming up, or we're already facing right now. So, it would, in a sense, permit people to claim force major as a matter of right, and not try and claim it by relating back to the contract, which may or may not contemplate such a situation. Though I must say, in all fairness, that the government has clarified that this could be treated as a natural calamity, provided your contract contemplates a natural calamity as an event of force major. But what if it is not there? What do you do then? How do you explain to your landlord that you're not going to be able to pay the rent for the past 1 month because you've had absolutely no income coming in, or or other contracts? So how do you defer the performance of your obligations? So we would need to enact a law which gives some sort of a deferral to contracting parties for a limited period, and maintains the contract. It doesn't it doesn't terminate the contract, and the contractual relationship can continue after some time. So this is what Singapore has done, and this is what perhaps India could consider doing by borrowing some of those design features and enacting a similar law. I think merely by increasing the limit for IBC proceedings from, say, 1 lakh to 1 crore is really not enough. I mean, it's neither here nor there. So we need a proactive law. So that was what got me thinking about this issue. And
Thank you,
yeah.
Manu. Sashwati, do you have a follow-up? I think that's a very interesting thought, of freezing your contractual obligations, and that, really in terms of small businesses, that's where people are stuck. Cash flow issues, being able to make payments, etc.
So Manu, even as I was listening to you, the question that I was thinking of is that while uh, the kind of law that you're talking about really takes away a lot of the stress that any MSME would undergo currently in terms of, where do I pay the next month's rent from, and where does my working capital come from, and how do I, but the challenge really lies in helping them get their revenue back on stream. Because it's one thing to defer payments, it's quite
Yes.
another thing to help them earn money. And I think our challenge really is to kind of join the dots in that entire value chain to be able, because I mean, okay, let's say you open the MSME sector, which is essentially a B2B sector, and then you don't open the larger sectors. Who are they selling to? Where do they get their money from?
Absolutely. That is one issue. The other issue is one of allocation of risk as well. How does one allocate risk in this context? Because after all, the buck has to stop somewhere as well. So, I mean, that's something that the challenge really would be to therefore strike a balance between these obligations and try and preserve contracts, contractual relationships, and also ensure that there's enough liquidity going forward in order that there is power to spend money after this deferral of these contractual obligations.
Yeah, but Manu, the question really is, it's not really about the paucity of credit. Credit has always been available. So you increase liquidity, money comes into their hands, and there are people who are ready to lend money, etc. But as an MSME, would I borrow money if I wasn't sure how I was going to ever repay it? And today the economy, does it really give me the confidence? Because my exports are going to be hit. I can't export for the longest time. I don't know when I can. I'm not going to produce because I can't export. I can't sell because I don't have access to raw materials. I don't have the necessary inputs, and most MSMEs are in quote unquote non-essential businesses, right? So how do we balance all of this?
That is true. The other option is if you don't have such a law, they are small companies are much worse off without this sort of protection. So would it not be better that if there is some sort of a protection where a balance is sought to be struck in order that these people are still left standing on their feet going forward, because they will have absolutely no relief otherwise. Tomorrow, if suppose a landlord says no, you have to pay that full rental, how do you get out of it? Either you terminate the lease or you pay. So why not defer things, or why not arrive at some sort of a commercial accommodation which the law facilitates, and defer obligations for some time, so that both parties will be able to arrive at a via media solution. Such
Yeah, that's a valid point, Sashwati. I mean, Manu's point is, at least for the time being, let people, remain, let there be a standstill, so at least they can stand to take up the fight, when things recover. And this actually goes back to, I think, 6 or 8 months ago, or 10 months ago now, when we had the panel where you were on the panel with Kanaya and Vivek Reddy, where we talked at that time, pre-COVID, was the Indian economy punch drunk? And, at a time right now, and clearly the whole world has been knocked out. So there's a related question that Chetan Krasta asks, and this is for you, Sashwati.
Just 1 second, Timothy. I wasn't suggesting for a minute that the deferment was a bad idea. I'm just saying that if the deferment is time bound, what in effect we are doing is giving ourselves a timeline within which we need to get everything up and alive and kicking.
Yes.
Which means that if I'm saying that I will defer it for 6 months, do I also have a parallel plan which tells me how can I get the MSMEs back on track within 6 months? So, the two will have to go hand in hand. It cannot be either or.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So my thought on that would be is if you go for some sort of a deferral, and if it could be done under some sort of an assessor who will weigh the risks and the costs of such a deferral and perhaps even reduce the deferral in his opinion, or after taking in after arriving at a after looking at all the facts and circumstances, then perhaps some sort of a mechanism like that would be helpful. I mean, today if you look at it, most of the courts are pretty much idle. I mean, they're only hearing cases on which are absolute emergencies, but otherwise perhaps some of the judicial officers and judges could even consider something like this, could even adjudicate upon something like this in the meanwhile.
Yeah, and just I do think Shashwati, we probably need to have a further conversation and have somebody from the government, to the extent that they can speak openly and freely on what the plan is actually to help with policies on to create revenues. But this and this is a question directed to you, Shashwati, by Chetan Krasta. He says the COVID crisis will result in a reduction of GDP growth. And is this, and you as an editor of the Economic Times, a former editor, I mean, is this necessarily a bad thing? Some economists had in the past criticized government's relentless pursuit of growth. But do you think this is an opportunity for governments to focus on inequalities and the environment and social welfare rather than just looking at economic growth?
Again, my simple answer to that would be that they don't run at cross purposes. Economic growth is also very important to bring in the kind of equality into the system that you are talking about. You need money. I mean, as you can see today, if we are asking the migrant labor to pay for his own train ticket, we must be really short on cash, right? So if you don't have the cash to fight, whether it is pollution, whether it is climate change, whether it is a pandemic, whether it is just normal health care, you still need money. And especially going forward, if you need to strengthen your public health care system and you need to actually make preventive health care more accessible, you need universal health care, you need money. You need money. So, the question really is, do you need to grow at 8%? Do you need to grow at 10%? Is 1% growth enough? Now that's just sort of, it's a question of mathematics. How do you balance one against the other? But to say that you need not grow and let's stop growing and let's first, you can't cross the river after all the water has flown out, because it never will happen, right?